Today in this presentation, I will be talking about the learning theory behaviourism. Learning theories are defined as a particular framework designed to enable people to absorb, process, and retain information while learning. Learning theories take into account many factors such as cognitive, emotional, and environmental influences, as well as prior experience, which plays an equal and important role in how we acquire knowledge and retain the skills we learn. There are many types of learning theories, such as constructivism and cognitivism. However, behaviourism is the particular learning theory that I will be talking about today. From a behaviourist perspective, growth and development are seen to be a result of the connections established between stimulus input and behavioural responses that are shaped by a wide variety of reinforcers, such as food, drink, praise, a smile, or a new toy. The role of the adults in this is to provide these reinforcements. Therefore, development is seen as a process of the individual learning increasingly complex and refined ways of acting as a result of the consequences and rewards that have followed the behaviour. To use the behavioural perspective in teaching, you would assess and provide what you feel is necessary in response to behaviour in the belief that children acquire many favourable and unfavourable responses simply by watching, learning, and listening from the others around them. You would apply a set of practical procedures that combine reinforcement, modelling, and the manipulation of situational cues to change behaviour. You would also make decisions about when it is appropriate to use consequences, reinforcement, rewards, or punishment to either reinforce positive behaviour or deter negative behaviour. This is evident through two of the main concepts of behaviourism, such as these are operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Classical conditioning was first discovered by Ivan Pavlov in 1904, when he won the Nobel Prize in Physiology, while continuing his research on the digestive system of dogs, when he noted that dogs salivated before they received food. Pavlov's dogs had come to associate the footsteps of his lab technician who fed the dogs with the presence of food that was given to them. The sound had been conditioned to cause the reflex response of salivation. Originally, the stimulus, which was the food, produced the response, which was salivation. When the sight or sound of the lab technician became the stimulus, it produced salivation. The salivation response is a reflex response that has been conditioned to a new stimulus, which was the sight or the sound of the technician. Pavlov began experiments by associating sounds such as a bell, tuning fork, and metronome with the food and found that after a few trials, the dogs could be conditioned to respond to the sound by salivating. As a result of Pavlov's works, clear evidence was provided for a very simple type of learning that was based on the repetitive association of different stimuli. This is what we now know as classical conditioning. The next major feature of behaviourism is operant conditioning. Operant conditioning was developed by Edward Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. It refers to a type of learning in which the consequences that follow a response determine whether the response is likely to be repeated. An alternative name for operant conditioning is instrumental conditioning. This was further experimented by Edward Thorndike, which refers to the process in which an individual makes an association between behaviour and the consequences that follow it. Therefore, a major part of operant conditioning is reinforcement. Reinforcement is administered after a response that strengthens and increases the likelihood of that response occurring over time. Positive reinforcement occurs when a response is followed by a positive event that increases the likelihood of the response happening again. Example, rewards of food, good grades, etc. There is a higher incentive for these things, as a positive reinforcer should always be administered as a consequence of good behaviour and should not come before the good behaviour. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, occurs when a response is followed by the removal of an unpleasant event or threat of punishment. There is an increase in the likelihood of the desired behavior happening or being strengthened over time. Examples of this would include a child cleaning his room to end his mother's nagging, or a student following school rules to avoid detention. Negative reinforcement is often confused with punishment, but in actual fact is aimed at decreasing the target behavior. Token economies are a good way of reinforcing good habits or behaviors. In a token economy, a secondary reinforcement, such as a gold star, may be collected in exchange for a primary reinforcement, such as food, like lollies, or even some privileges, such as free time. Limitations of behaviorism suggest that behavioral theories do not count for free will and internal influences such as moods, thoughts, and feelings. Behaviorism also does not account for other types of learning, especially learning that occurs without use of reinforcement and punishment. Another limitation is that a student raised entirely on the behavior circumstances can become reliant on external approval and rewards. Some strengths of behaviorism are that behaviorism is based on observational behaviors, so that it is easier to quantify and collect data and information when conducting research, and that techniques such as behavioral analysis and token economies are often very useful in changing harmful behaviors in both children and adults. In my opinion, I thoroughly believe that if a student enjoys a subject, that they will do well in it, and it is through their behaviors towards their subjects that have the most influence over how well they do or how much they may enjoy a subject. The theory definitely portrays a lot of what I have experienced and what I believe I would find useful in a classroom. Especially in operant conditioning, and in particular the token economy, I believe that it would still be very useful, even in older year levels, as a form of motivation to do well. Personally, in school, the token economy was definitely a standout, as teachers I had used them through my primary and secondary years, even up to my Year 11 psychology class, when we were learning about token economies. We each wrote our name on a chart and had to reach a certain amount of stars to obtain a prize at the end of the week. This was definitely motivation to do things such as hand in homework on time or answer questions in class. In conclusion, I believe that the learning theory behaviorism is a very effective learning theory, as it encourages children to want to learn through the many effective methods of conditioning, especially operant conditioning and the reinforcement methods, which prove to be fun and a motivational way of learning.